Life stories, power struggle on the highway, how one FBI director took down corrupt cops. The highway stretched on, dark and silent, cutting through the night like a ribbon of emptiness. Street lights blinked as they passed, their glow flickering against the sleek, black SUV cruising steadily in the right lane. Olivia Parker had been driving for what felt like forever. Her mind was still tangled in the classified briefing she just attended, the weight of her new position as Chief of National Security weighing heavily on her shoulders. The hours had been long, and it was already past midnight, but she was used to the grind. What she wasn't used to, what she hadn't prepared for, was the sudden flash of red and blue lights in her rearview mirror. Her grip on the wheel tightened as her eyes flicked to the speedometer. 68 miles per hour, not even a mile over the limit. No erratic swerves, no sudden lane changes. No reason to pull over, and yet the police car behind her hadn't budged. A frown tugged at Olivia's lips as she exhaled sharply and flicked the turn signal on, guiding her car to the shoulder. Years of experience in law enforcement meant she knew the drill, and this was routine, nothing to worry about. She had worked with cops from all over the country, and she was well versed in what to expect during a traffic stop. Or, at least, she thought she was. The patrol car rolled to a stop behind her, and something about the way it was parked felt off. The officer hadn't pulled up too close like they usually did. Instead, he sat back for just a beat too long. Olivia adjusted her rearview mirror to get a better look. When the driver's side door of the cruiser swung open, she noted that the officer who stepped out wasn't anyone she recognized. That wasn't unusual. She didn't know every cop on the beat. But there was something about the way he moved. His posture was stiff, too controlled, too deliberate. He had one hand resting on his belt near his firearm, and the other held a flashlight that swung erratically as he made his way up to her window. She pressed the button to roll down the window and kept both hands visible on the steering wheel. "Evening, officer," Olivia said, keeping her voice calm and professional. The man didn't respond right away. Instead, the light from his flashlight flickered across her face, too bright, too intrusive. License and registration. No pleasantries, no explanation, just the demand. Olivia held back a sigh. This wasn't normal. "May I ask why I'm being pulled over?" she asked, her voice steady but firm. The officer chewed his gum, his eyes studying her a bit too intently. Finally, he responded. "License and registration." Olivia didn't move at first. Her instincts, the ones that had kept her alive during countless tense situations, told her this wasn't going to be an ordinary traffic stop. She needed to de-escalate this before it went sideways. Slowly, she reached for her purse on the passenger seat, making sure to keep her movements measured and predictable. When she pulled out her wallet, she handed over her government-issued ID along with her driver's license. The officer glanced at them for a second, then flicked his eyes back to her. "FBI?" he asked, his tone flat. Olivia nodded once. "Yes, sir." There was a long silence. "Step out of the vehicle." The command wasn't loud, but it carried weight. It felt like a slap to her chest. She blinked, her stomach dropping. "Excuse me?" The officer took a half step back, his right hand hovering near his weapon now. "Step out of the vehicle." Olivia's heart rate spiked. This wasn't just a routine traffic stop. This was something else entirely, and she wasn't going to let fear take over. She had been trained for moments like this. The officer's posture was more rigid now, the tension in the air palpable. She could feel it pushing against her, trying to force her into submission. But she wasn't going down without a fight. She wasn't going to become another statistic. "Sir, you are outside of protocol," Olivia said, her voice even but firm as she gripped the door handle. The officer's knuckles whitened as he tightened his hold on the door. "I said, step out of the car." There it was, the edge in his voice. He wasn't just exerting authority anymore. He was trying to prove something. And Olivia knew exactly how that went. She had dealt with people like him before, men who thought that a badge gave them the right to intimidate, to cross lines. But this wasn't just about power. It was about control. "On what grounds, officer?" she asked, her voice still cool, but every word calculated. For a moment, the officer hesitated. His lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, he closed the distance between them, taking a step forward with his flashlight still aimed at her face. The beam was blinding. It felt like a weapon in itself, and for a split second, Olivia wondered if he would use it against her. "I don't have to explain myself to you," he muttered, his voice low, his irritation rising. Olivia didn't flinch. "Actually, you do." The officer's expression soured. "Lady, I don't give a damn who you work for." Olivia's pulse remained steady. She wasn't afraid. She was in control. But something inside her shifted. This wasn't just a power play. It was a dangerous game he was playing, and she was a pawn in it. Before she could say anything else, the officer slammed his free hand against the roof of her car. The sound echoed through the empty highway, sharp and violent. "I said, get out!" Her fingers itched to grab her phone, to document everything, but she knew better. One wrong move could make things worse. So instead, she kept her hands where he could see them and leveled him with a look that demanded answers. "Get off me!" she snapped, refusing to show weakness. But the officer wasn't backing down. He leaned in closer, towering over her. His breath was ragged now, like he was fighting to keep control. He wasn't going to win this battle, not today. And then, thank God, another set of sirens broke through the tension. Another squad car pulled up behind them, its lights flashing red and blue. For a moment, Olivia felt a brief wave of relief. Another officer meant more accountability, more eyes on the situation. But as the second officer stepped out of the car, Olivia's relief quickly turned to suspicion. This wasn't backup, this was reinforcement. The new officer, tall and broad-shouldered, didn't bother with pleasantries. His gaze flickered between Olivia and Kearns before landing on her. "Problem here?" he asked, his tone flat, giving nothing away. Kearns smirked, the tension still crackling in the air. "Just dealing with a non-compliant driver?" Olivia took a second to assess the situation. She was outnumbered now, and Kearns knew it. He was playing a dangerous game, and he was trying to see just how far he could push. But Olivia wouldn't be the one to back down, not today. Olivia stayed silent for a beat, considering her options. The second officer stepped forward, his eyes flicking over her for a second, and then he said it. "Ma'am, step out of the vehicle." Not FBI Director Parker, not even Miss Parker, just ma'am. The casual disregard for her position, for who she was, wasn't lost on her. This wasn't just about defiance, it was personal. She'd been in enough dangerous situations to know the feeling that hung in the air now. This wasn't some diplomatic negotiation overseas or a high-stakes counterterrorism mission. This was something different. This was home, and home didn't feel safe tonight. She could feel the tension crawling up her spine, thick and suffocating. For a moment, Olivia considered staying in the car, refused to comply, let them escalate. But she knew better than to play into that kind of game. If she didn't comply, they'd find a reason to justify whatever came next. The escalation would be swift, and it wouldn't end well for her. On the other hand, if she complied, she was at their mercy. There was no win here. "Ma'am," the second officer repeated, stepping closer. Olivia could feel the heat of his body just inches from hers. There was no good choice, no right move. Her mind raced, each possibility flashing like a sequence in her mind. But she knew that waiting too long to make a decision was just as dangerous. She inhaled slowly, making sure to keep her movements deliberate and slow, and reached for the door handle. The moment her fingers touched the metal, she could feel Kearns' eyes on her, the pressure mounting in the small space between them. The door clicked open. The cold night air immediately rushed into the car, biting against her skin. The rush of adrenaline hit her instantly, but she forced herself to remain steady. The moment her feet hit the pavement, she felt the weight of vulnerability settle over her. Kearns towered over her, his posture aggressive, his hands still hovering near his gun. The second officer stayed slightly behind, positioning himself to cover any blind spots. This wasn't just a traffic stop anymore. It was something far darker, and Olivia knew it. "Turn around," Cairns ordered. Olivia's mind raced. She had been through tense interrogations, high-stakes negotiations, and countless crises. She knew how to read a room, how to read a person, and right now she could feel that Cairns was about to push her past her limits. But she wasn't about to let him take control. "I'm not turning around until you tell me why I'm being detained," she said, her voice firm. Cairns didn't answer immediately. His nostrils flared, his face twisting into a scowl. "Suspicious behavior," he finally muttered, but the words felt like a hollow excuse. There was no real reasoning here. He was just pushing because he could. "What's suspicious behavior?" Olivia asked, her patience thinning. Cairns smirked, shaking his head like she was just another problem to solve. "Refusing to comply." It was the trap. He was giving her an ultimatum. Refuse to comply, and she'd be labeled as resisting. Comply, and it would be an admission of guilt, of submission. Olivia knew how this game played out, and she wasn't about to fall for it. Before she could respond, Cairns grabbed her wrist. Too fast, too hard. The moment his hand closed around her, her instincts kicked in. She jerked back slightly, shifting her weight and pulling her wrist just enough to keep from being restrained. She wasn't going down like this. "Get your hands off me," Olivia snapped, her voice sharp and clear. But Cairns wasn't letting go. The second officer took a step closer, his radio already in hand, prepared to escalate the situation even further. "Got a problem here?" the second officer asked, his voice cool, but Olivia could hear the undercurrent of unease. Cairns tightened his grip on Olivia's wrist, his fingers digging into her skin. "I think she's resisting," he muttered, his voice dripping with irritation. The second officer's radio crackled as he spoke into it, but the words he was about to say, the words that had justified so many unnecessary escalations before, chilled Olivia to the core. "We have a non-compliant suspect," he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. Suspect, not citizen, not FBI Director Parker, just a suspect. The word felt like a slap in the face, an attempt to strip away everything she was, everything she stood for. And that's when it happened. Cairns didn't hesitate. The second his hand dropped to his holster, Olivia saw the flash of metal. The gun came out, quick, controlled, precise, and before she could even register what was happening, the barrel was inches from her face. Time stretched out, slow and suffocating. This was it. This wasn't a mission. This wasn't a tactical situation where she could fight her way out. This was just a lonely stretch of highway, and she was unarmed. She was at the mercy of these two officers. Her breath stayed even, controlled. Every cell in her body screamed at her to move, to fight back, to do something, but she knew better. One wrong move and she wouldn't be writing the report tomorrow, but they would. Cairns' eyes bore into hers, his finger hovering over the trigger. He was testing her. He was waiting for her to blink, to make a mistake. "Do you feel powerful now?" Cairns asked, his voice low, almost taunting. The words hit Olivia like a wave of cold rage. This wasn't about a traffic stop. It never had been. This was about domination, humiliation, and she could feel it, the shift inside her. This wasn't just about her. This was about the countless others who had been in her position, who hadn't had the means or the platform to fight back. This was about every life lost to injustice, every moment where power was abused. Before she could open her mouth to speak, a voice cut through the thick, suffocating tension. "Hey, I'm recording this!" The shout came from somewhere off to the side, clear and sharp. It wasn't just the words, it was the force behind them. Someone had seen, and more importantly, someone had proof. Cairns didn't lower his weapon, but Olivia saw the shift in his stance. His posture changed, just slightly, but it was enough. He was aware of the phone now, aware of the eyes on them. And that hesitation, it was everything.
The second officer glanced quickly toward the man holding the phone. He was standing just off the side of the road, a safe distance away, but close enough to capture every moment. "You sure you want to do this, officer?" the man asked, his voice steady, calm, as though he wasn't standing in the middle of a potential disaster. Kearns didn't respond. He was still holding the gun, but now his gaze flickered between Olivia and the man with the phone. Olivia saw it, the panic beginning to settle in his eyes. This wasn't a situation they could control anymore. The second officer shifted slightly, a hand reaching for his own radio. But Olivia wasn't about to let him make the call that would justify whatever they planned next.
The tension in the air grew thicker with each passing second. Olivia could see it in the second officer's eyes, uncertainty, hesitation. He wasn't sure what to do next. He knew, just like Olivia, that this wasn't going to end well for either of them if they pushed any further. They were no longer in control of the situation. Olivia stepped forward, her voice sharp and commanding. "Touch him, and I will personally have you charged with obstruction of justice." For the first time since this entire ordeal began, the second officer hesitated. His hand, which had been hovering near his belt, dropped slowly to his side. There was a shift, a crack in the authority they had so far wielded over her. They weren't used to someone standing their ground, not like this, not like Olivia. The second officer shifted his weight, taking a step back. His face was pale now, and Olivia could see the panic setting in. The sirens in the distance were getting louder, the lights flashing in the rearview mirror, signaling the arrival of backup. Kearns didn't look at her anymore. His eyes were fixed on the approaching lights, his thoughts clearly racing. He could feel the walls closing in. His grip on the gun loosened just slightly, but not enough to make her feel safe. But it was enough. It was just enough to give Olivia the courage to push even further. "Put the weapon down," she commanded, her voice steady, unwavering. Kearns didn't immediately comply, but he could feel the pressure mounting. The second officer, still holding his radio, seemed to hesitate as well. They were stuck in the spotlight now, and their next move would decide everything. A few more moments of silence passed, thick with tension, before the second officer's radio crackled to life again. "Unit 47, status." A beat of silence, and then the sound of multiple sirens filled the air. The backup was arriving, and it wasn't going to be the kind they wanted. Olivia's gaze remained fixed on Kearns, unblinking. She could see the desperation in his eyes. He knew the jig was up. The cavalry wasn't coming to help him. It was coming to hold him accountable. Kearns finally let go of the gun. It wasn't a surrender, but it was the closest thing to it. The tension wasn't gone, not yet, but it had shifted. The power dynamic had changed. The second officer, realizing there was no getting out of this, moved toward the witness. His hand was already reaching for his belt, probably to confiscate the phone, but Olivia wasn't going to let that happen. She moved forward quickly, her voice cutting through the air. "Touch him, and I will personally make sure you're charged with obstruction of justice." The second officer froze, his hand mid-motion. He didn't say anything, but it was clear he understood the weight behind her words. The power had shifted, and there was nothing they could do about it. The second officer, realizing there was no getting out of this, moved toward the witness. His hand was already reaching for his belt, probably to confiscate the phone, but Olivia wasn't going to let that happen. She moved forward quickly, her voice cutting through the air. "Touch him, and I will personally make sure you're charged with obstruction of justice." The second officer froze, his hand mid-motion. He didn't say anything, but it was clear he understood the weight behind her words. The power had shifted, and there was nothing they could do about it. The sirens were deafening now. Olivia didn't need to look behind her to know the other officers were closing in. Backup had arrived, real backup, the kind that came with accountability. Kieran's posture was slumped now, and his hand had fully released the gun. It wasn't aimed at her anymore. Instead, he was looking past her, eyes darting nervously toward the oncoming cars. He was trying to find a way out, a way to regain control of a situation he had lost completely. The first officer to arrive on the scene was a lieutenant, the insignia on his uniform glinting under the lights. He took in the scene with a quick scan.
Olivia standing with her hands at her sides, the second officer standing uneasily to the side, and Kearns, whose weapon was now holstered, but whose body language betrayed his frustration. "Director Parker?" The lieutenant's voice was cautious, but he had already seen enough to know this wasn't just another routine traffic stop gone wrong. Olivia gave him a sharp nod, her voice unwavering. "I want these officers detained, now." The second officer took a step back, a small but visible sign that he was realizing how badly this could go for him. Kearns, on the other hand, had a look of disbelief. He was still trying to process what was happening, as though he couldn't quite believe that this time he wouldn't get away with it. "You've got to be kidding me," Kearns muttered, his voice thick with frustration. Olivia didn't flinch. "You pulled a gun on the director of the FBI. Let me know if you'd like to add resisting arrest to the list." Her words were final, authoritative. She wasn't just going to let this slide. Not for Kearns, not for any of them. She'd spent too many years watching justice almost happen, too many years seeing victims treated like suspects, seeing officers push the boundaries until the lines of right and wrong blurred. But tonight, she wasn't going to let that happen, not this time. The second officer didn't resist as he was cuffed, but he kept his eyes down, avoiding Olivia's gaze. He was a man who realized, too late, that he had bet on the wrong side of the line. The lieutenant, after a brief but telling pause, turned to his officers. "Cuff them both," he ordered. And just like that, the officers who had abused their authority were now the ones being arrested. Kearns' eyes remained locked on Olivia, but she wasn't the one who was afraid now. The cuffs clicked around his wrists, and for the first time in his career, he realized he wasn't untouchable. The second officer, still silent, was cuffed as well. They were being led toward the waiting squad cars, their heads down, their faces pale. Olivia watched them go, knowing this wasn't just about two bad officers. This was about the system that allowed them to thrive for far too long. The witness who had been filming the entire ordeal was still standing by the side of the road, his phone now lowered but still recording. He caught Olivia's eye, his gaze steady, even grateful. "You good?" he asked, his voice quieter now, as though understanding the magnitude of the moment. Olivia nodded, taking a deep breath. "Thanks to you," she replied.
The witness hesitated before speaking again, his voice quieter this time. "They do this all the time, just not to someone like you." The comment stung in a way she hadn't expected. He was right. This wasn't new. It wasn't a first. This was a system of abuse that had been allowed to go unchecked for far too long, and she had the power to do something about it. Most people didn't. "Most people don't have the power to do something about it," she replied, her voice low but resolute. The lieutenant who had taken charge earlier walked over to her, his face still serious. "Director Parker, do you want to press charges personally?" he asked, his tone more cautious than before. Olivia shook her head, her expression hard. "This isn't personal. This is systemic. I'll be filing an official report first thing in the morning, and I want internal affairs involved, immediately." The lieutenant exhaled, clearly realizing the gravity of the situation. "Understood." Olivia wasn't finished. "I also want full transparency on their disciplinary records. I want access to everything. No more hiding." The lieutenant hesitated for a moment before giving a reluctant nod. "I'll make the call." Good, because this wasn't just about one bad traffic stop. This was about all the ones that never got recorded, all the injustices that went unnoticed. The footage from that night went viral. By dawn, the Justice Department had launched a formal investigation. Kearns was stripped of his badge and charged with assault with a deadly weapon. His partner was suspended indefinitely. The police department released a statement trying to play damage control, but the truth had already spread far and wide. Olivia sat in her office, watching the coverage unfold on the screen. She steepled her fingers under her chin, her gaze sharp and calculating. The calls would come, the press conferences, the political maneuvering from people who would pretend to care but were silently wishing she had let it slide. But she wasn't letting anything slide.
Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. An unknown number. Normally, she wouldn't have answered. Tonight, she did. Director Parker? There was a pause, and then a voice she recognized, the witness from the roadside. I just wanted to say I appreciate what you're doing. Most people wouldn't. Olivia leaned back in her chair, a slow breath leaving her chest. Most people don't have the power to do something about it. There was a pause on the other end of the line. But you do, the man said softly. For the first time in a long time, Olivia felt something close to hope. Justice doesn't happen in silence, she said quietly. It happens when people refuse to look away. And that was the moment when everything started to change. Lessons learned. The story illustrates the importance of standing up against injustice, even when the odds seem insurmountable. Olivia's refusal to back down in the face of police misconduct teaches us that power is not just about authority or position. It's about having the courage to speak out when something is wrong. It emphasizes the idea that justice isn't achieved through silence or avoidance, but through taking action, regardless of the personal or professional risks involved. Olivia's unwavering stance also highlights the significance of accountability, not only for individuals, but for systems that perpetuate wrongdoing. Her decision to hold corrupt officers responsible represents the need for integrity, transparency, and a commitment to righting wrongs. This story reminds us that systemic change often begins with a single moment of resistance, and that real courage is standing up for what's right, even when the world around us might prefer we look the other way. Ultimately, it teaches us that the fight for justice is ongoing, and it's up to each of us to contribute to making the world a fairer, more transparent place.
If you found this video helpful or thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It really helps more people discover our content. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest updates from our channel. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next videos.